The relationship between the cannabis plant and humankind is prehistoric. Believed to have originated as a wild plant in Asia, it was present at the very beginnings of agriculture and has been in our service ever since. The small seed of the cannabis plant is a highly nutritious food and also produces a high-quality, multi-purpose oil. Its stalk is the source of a durable fiber which helped provide the raw material for clothing the earliest human communities.
Hemp probably is the oldest crop of multiple use benefits to humankind, as far as we understand it. You could eat it, and you could wear it, to say the least.
Hemp seed is the #1 most nutritious food you can put in your body. Gruel is hemp seed and water. Entire civilizations have subsisted on it for times of famine.
The smoking or ingestion of the budding parts of the cannabis plant for their euphoric effects has also played a part in our history as social custom, medicine, and as a religious ritual.
The Scythian warriors coming out of Mongolia and the steppes of Europe over there carried this herb into battle with them. It was both a medicine and a relaxant, and they found Scythian princesses buried with it in their pouches alongside their weapons and their horse.
Cannabis sativa has been used all over the world by a wide variety of cultures in a wide variety of different countries. It's by no means anything unique to the United States. And so I think as people began to use cannabis sativa in a wide variety of ways, they began to notice that there were really a lot of distinctive different uses, one for industrial purposes. So a lot of varieties were specifically bred for industrial uses, primarily for the fiber and the oil that came from the plant. Whereas other cultures were more interested in using cannabis sativa for other more personal uses or cultural purposes, and that would be those varieties that have the higher THC content.
Our own language reflects the dual nature of the cannabis plant and reveals a certain disconnect between the two aspects of the same species of plant. Hemp is the common name for the once important fiber crop, which was cultivated in North America beginning with the arrival of the Europeans. The word marijuana, which originated in Spanish-speaking America, conjures a very different image and history. In the lexicon of contemporary American slang, there is no shortage of synonyms for this word, which refers to the plant first criminalized by the federal government in 1937, known variously as pot, grass, weed, smoke, and reefer. The history of hemp in America begins with the first agricultural endeavors of the colonial period. Hemp had been an indispensable article of trade throughout Europe since earliest times, and had been used virtually all over the world to make all types of fiber-based commodities, from clothing to fishing nets to writing paper.
In England in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, there were provinces and areas of England where it was mandatory that the people grow some block of hemp for the kingdom.
Despite the need, a less than prolific hemp culture existed in the British Isles, resulting in a chronic reliance on imported fiber. That dependency caused considerable anxiety for the British, especially whenever war threatened to cut off their supply. With the establishment of colonies in North America, the English were eager to introduce the seed and strongly encouraged the colonial farmer to plant hemp alongside his other crops. Key to their enthusiasm was that no other fiber was as well suited for transformation into the strong, flexible sails, rope, and rigging so important to the British Navy. Hemp was excellent in this regard as it resisted the corrosive effects of salt water, and when it did begin to fail as rigging, it was picked apart and used for caulking the hulls of the wooden ships. Hemp was an essential commodity for a nation which wished to expand its influence and its wealth by dominion over the world's oceans. For all its utility, hemp culture expanded very slowly in colonial America. In the South, it lagged behind tobacco, which became a very profitable article of trade for the colonists in Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas. Despite persistent urging from England to produce more hemp, the Southerners were content to rely on tobacco as their chief money crop. In 1700, Massachusetts attempted to encourage her fledgling hemp industry by requiring all manufacturers of rope to use only fiber grown within her borders. The early shipbuilders along the northeast coast, whose industry had always been dependent on imported hemp, saw the value of a ready supply of good fiber on their side of the Atlantic. George Washington, a hemp farmer himself, saw great potential for the Virginia farmer, but lamented the glut of foreign fiber, mostly Russian hemp, in the colonial market. Despite the many years of inducements and prodding, Americans remained dependent on foreign hemp even as they achieved their own political independence. Freed from the constraints of their colonial past and looking for new and greener pastures, the more adventurous citizens of the new nation began to leave their homes along the eastern seaboard and follow the wilderness road through the Appalachian Mountains, or sail down the Ohio River into the rich, abundant lands of the West. The stories of the rich rolling lands and flowing waters of the central plateau of Kentucky enticed many across the mountains, as did the generosity of the Virginia legislature, which offered to deed 400 acres to those who would make settlement in Kentucky by building a cabin. As added incentive, those who planted corn would receive 1,000 more.
Land was being worn out back in Virginia. There were all sorts of political and social problems developed in that on the eve of the Revolution and then in the Revolution itself. And land became a magnet that drew people west, almost in a frantic population movement. They dreamed, and I don't, historians have discussed this, I don't actually know how firmly most of them knew about this or dreamed of the Eden of the West, that here they would get away from their troubles back east. Here they would certainly make their fortunes in this good land.
The first documentation of hemp being grown in Kentucky was in 1775, and that was by Archibald McNeil in Boyle County, and he grew a small crop, not for sale, but probably just for home use.
Hemp can be grown in a wide range of climates and conditions, but factors like the length of the growing season, soil quality, amounts of rainfall, and proper drainage are critical to the strength and length of the fibers the plant will produce. The dark, fertile soil and mild seasons of central Kentucky seemed particularly well suited to the task and produced tall, healthy stands with strong fibers and a minimum amount of wood in the stalk.
If you direct plant seed in the soil, it comes up, it's a weed, just like tobacco's a weed. They both grow very quickly, and the hemp seed will grow and the other weed seeds come up, but hemp is such a vigorous plant, and the way we raise it, it's so thick, it'll outgrow all the other weeds and kill them. It shades them, and they die.
The plant's natural hardiness and resistance to disease helped it proliferate on the frontier, despite the primitive farming methods. A farmer could sow as much seed as he had available, and in a good season be assured that he would have a substantial crop in just a few months. Once harvested, the fiber suffered very little from spoilage, making it ideal for storage and transport. The chronic shortage of cash money on the frontier also made hemp a valuable commodity for farmers who could exchange their crop in payment for needed goods. In 1788, the first newspaper in the West, the Kentucky Gazette, established in Lexington the year before, offered to take bundles of raw hemp in payment for subscriptions. By 1800, Kentucky's log cabin economy had been transformed into a diverse and thriving agricultural economy, and the pioneer's little hemp patch had become a profitable and extensive enterprise. John Wesley Hunt, the state's first millionaire, made a substantial part of his fortune in the wholesale trade and manufacture of hempen products. In the 5-county area surrounding Lexington, it appeared that the American hemp industry had found a place where it might flourish. And indeed, for many years, the bluegrass region of Kentucky was the center of hemp production in the United States. Making his way from Lexington to Frankfort or down through Versailles to Danville, a traveler in the post-Revolutionary War period in Kentucky would have been struck by the recurring sight of dense stands of leafy plants that stretched across the wide fields. At summer's end, the plants would stand 10 to 12 feet in height. and the traveler would have seen workers, mostly black slaves, bent in the fields, cutting the stalks, tying them in bundles, and stacking them in shocks. In the late autumn, the bundles would be broken up and the stalks spread across the fields, exposing them to the early winter rains and freezes. The process, called dew retting, frees the desired fiber from the resin which holds it to the woody center portion of the stalk. After retting, the stalks are picked up and reshocked, allowing them to dry before the breaking. In dry weather, the workers would return to the fields carrying their crude wooden breaking benches. Moving from shock to shock, they would separate the fine fiber from the woody herds by throwing the heavy lever of the hemp brake. The extracted fiber was then tied into loose bundles and stored in a dry part of the barn. At the end of a day of breaking, the piles of discarded herds were burned in the fields, signaling the end of another growing season. Along with the expansion of hemp cultivation, the manufacture of hempen goods had been progressing in the States since the days when the first settlers had spun crude hempen cloth on their spinning wheels as an improvement on the nettle lint and buffalo wool they had been using to make fabric.
The very earliest huntsmen came in here had to wear skins for clothing. Coonskin cap, everything they had on was coons. Their leggings and their feet were made out of animal hides. All right, you bring your family, they're going to wear animal hides until one of about 2 or 3 things. You either can manage to have with sheep, you can plant flax, or you can plant hemp.
Hemp was actually spun in the home. You could do the entire process to actually end up with clothing or textile fabric right in the home itself. The hemp might have been grown on the farm, and then of course you would do the retting or the rotting of the fibers, and then on to the hackling and the spinning, and then the weaving, and then making something into cloth. So that was easily done as a process right at home.
Cordage of various kinds was another necessity of frontier life, and smaller types of twine and rope could be produced at home without the aid of special equipment. As time went on, the demand for larger lengths and widths of rope for use in shipping and industry brought about the development of rope manufacturing sites known as rope walks. A rope walk was a long, narrow building, usually a wooden structure, with a hand-turned wheel at one end. Sometimes a horse or mule would be used to supply the power. The rope maker would attach a bundle of combed or hackled hemp to a hook on the wheel, and walking backward would twist the fibers around one another as they were drawn out of the bundle. The long yarns of fiber were in turn spun together for the desired width of rope. 2 events occurred in the American South in the 1790s which were to have a tremendous effect on the early hemp industry in Kentucky and later in the Midwest. The first occurred in 1795 with the signing of the Pinckney Treaty between the U.S. and Spain, which allowed Americans the right to freely navigate the entire length of the Mississippi River. It gave early traders much wider access to markets through the port of New Orleans. The second was the invention of the cotton gin. Prior to 1793, the use of cotton had been greatly limited by the difficulty of separating the lint from the seed. The development of the cotton gin in that year revolutionized the cotton industry and gave birth to the new king of the South.
Once you invent that little cotton gin, which is a very simple thing, once you develop that thing and then refined it and built larger gins, the cotton belt expanded just like wildfire.
In order to protect the cotton during shipment to the textile mills of Europe and New England, it had to be tightly compressed into bales and then covered and bound with strong material. Durable hemp bagging and cordage from Kentucky provided the answer. For each 300-pound bale of cotton, 15 pounds of hemp bagging and rope were required to suitably close